Hi, everyone. My name is Jesse Robbins, and welcome to LPLE from Dialogue FM. We're the podcast that lets you practice listening in English. We speak English slowly and clearly so that you can follow along and understand native English speakers more easily. I'm excited to help you improve your English listening skill, as well as help you learn new vocabulary, grammar, and idioms commonly heard in conversations among native English speakers. If you want to practice listening in English, then we invite you to join our conversation. Hi, Jane.
Hi, Jesse.
Today is Monday. It's the day after the 4-day holiday that is Thanksgiving. As many Americans go back to work after enjoying this 4-day holiday, it's very common for coworkers to ask the question, "So, how was your weekend?" Or, "Did you have a nice Thanksgiving holiday?" Or even more in depth, "What did you do for the 4-day holiday?" Now, I take it at City University, is that kind of question common among colleagues?
It is when we run into each other. We're usually running to classes so fast that it's actually relatively rare for us to have conversations of any length. We'd probably say, if we didn't have too much time to discuss it, we'd probably say, "Did you have a nice holiday?" And then a yes-no answer is kind of enough. Somebody would say, "Sure," and you? "Yes," and then everybody would run. Asking the question, "What did you do?" already sort of suggests that maybe you've got a few minutes to stand and talk or sit and talk with a cup of coffee, because that answer requires much more than just, "Sure, had a good time, thanks, you."
Now, you and I have talked about our travels to different countries in the past few episodes. And I wanted to talk to you about the kinds of questions that you received when you traveled, and the kinds of questions I received when I traveled, and how the cultural differences make the questions acceptable in other places, but not acceptable in American culture.
Yes. Mostly I've traveled in Western countries, but certainly when I went, for example, to Indonesia, I learned that I would be asked questions about whether I had children and perhaps how long we had been married and that sort of thing. And that would be pretty direct, probably almost impolite to start asking immediately in just about any Western country that I visited. I'm not saying it's true in all of them. I think questions about very personal things come later in the West. We don't ask, of course, about money or age. Questions are more general, and the British, of course, are famous for talking at great length about the weather, and gradually other things might come from that.
When I traveled to East and Southeast Asia, that's where most of my travels have been. Right? So you said that most of your travels have been in the Western countries. So we're talking Europe.
Yes, South America also.
So for Asia, I noticed that in Vietnam, it was very common for people to ask me, at least, if I had a wife, if I had a child, where do I work. Vietnamese people also told me that it's common for Vietnamese to ask about how much do you make? What is your salary?
Wow.
Now, interestingly enough, I never got that question. However, I did always get asked about my marriage status, my family status, if I had children, and how old I was. Now, the last part is actually extremely culturally and linguistically significant, because in Vietnam, how you address the person you're talking to, the pronoun you use to address them, is based off of age.
Yes.
So in that regard, my understanding is that the only reason, or the primary reason, the main reason why Vietnamese ask about your age is simply because they want to speak to you in the respectful pronoun. So, of course, your experience in Indonesia and my experience in Vietnam, those kinds of questions are dramatically different than the questions we would allow ourselves to ask in America, right? So, for this conversation, let's have a normal, standard conversation that we would have at the office, which is, how was your 4-day weekend?
Oh, pretty good. How about you? Did you do anything special?
Honestly, not really. It was very relaxing. During the 4-day weekend, it's very common for people to go shopping. We talked about Black Friday on our last episode. However, my wife and I didn't do much. We had dinner with her family, and then we had dinner with our close friends. Saturday, we spent all day, and I mean all day, in bed watching TV.
Wow.
It was very relaxing. From the moment we woke up until late at night, we were just watching our favorite television program. Now, we don't normally do that. That's a once in a year, twice in a year
luxury
activity that my wife and I do together. So that was the second time we did it this year. And then yesterday, my wife and I went to go gun shooting. We took a 4-hour gun safety class and shooting class. The first 2 hours were about safety, and the second 2 hours were about how to shoot a gun by actually shooting a gun. So, in that regard, we had a relaxing yet not typical 4-day weekend.
Yes. Was that the first time you had worked on shooting?
That was not the first time that we went to shoot guns. We have actually done that before. However, this was the first time that we took a class and received formal training. And the formal training was absolutely fantastic. So for any international students who visit America and are interested in American gun culture, I recommend you take a class. Don't go by yourself to a gun range. Just take a class. It's safer, more friendly, and definitely a good experience. So now, in that regard, Jane, how was your 4-day weekend? It sounded like it was pretty nice.
Before I answer that, I want to point out the way you asked the question. He said it sounded like it was pretty nice after having asked me. In other words, he was allowing me to say as little or as much as I want. And he was letting me know that he didn't want to intrude. So actually, it didn't turn out as well as I hoped. We had friends for dinner, and my husband and I worked. Doing a full Thanksgiving dinner takes 10 or 20 hours to get everything together, really.
1 or 2 days, right?
Yes, exactly. Full time, no resting. And for some reason, I was feeling a little sick by the time the company arrived. So we had a good time, but most of the time I was hoping that nobody would notice how bad I was feeling. I think I was just tired, but my stomach didn't feel good, and I had to fake a lot of my behavior because I felt so bad. I think the food was good, though, and we introduced people to each other who didn't know each other, and I was grateful that they enjoyed each other's company. And I also saw a friend who I haven't seen in 2 years, a very old friend, but someone who lives quite far away from me, so I don't see him very often. On Friday and Sunday, I did my favorite things. I didn't stay in bed all day, but I stayed in a chair all day just reading. On Saturday, we drove a little bit to Tacoma and saw some friends, mostly relaxing.
How are you feeling now?
I'm fine. I just got a very good sleep and everything was better. Thanks for asking.
It's interesting that for a 4-day holiday, many of us, for good reason, work very hard to prepare for the holiday.
Yes.
So in your case, you worked very hard to prepare a meal for your dinner party. There's other people who travel very long distances and go through much trouble to visit with family or friends. So in many ways, during the holiday, we're still very active, and we sometimes forget to give ourselves the chance to relax. So I'm really glad to hear that you're feeling better, and more importantly, I'm glad to hear that you had a day to yourself to read a book.
2 days. I stole fantastic. 2 days.
Now, when you have that kind of chance to read, what books do you like to read?
Sometimes I like nonfiction. Biographies, for example, interest me very much because biographies include history and personal psychological detail. This time, I think I read 2 novels. One of them was a mystery, and no, they were both mysteries, I think, but very interesting.
You can read 1 novel in 1 day?
Usually not, but this time I started at 7 in the morning and I finished at 9 at night.
That's very impressive. That's
usually not, though. Usually it takes me a week.
Well, now we are officially in the holiday season, which means that between now and, well, pretty much January 1st, many Americans are finalizing their holiday plans. That means finishing work projects or making flight arrangements and hotel arrangements, picking their vacation destination, talking to friends about where they're going to meet and where they're going to go. My understanding is that American work productivity drops very fast during this time.
Does it? The statistics say that?
That's my understanding.
I'm not surprised.
Yeah. Because many people are now starting to take their holiday vacation time, or because more people are leaving the office, the general teamwork starts to decrease because out of a team of 5, you have one person who leaves for one day, you have another person who leaves for 1 week. So the teams get smaller, so less work gets done. And I think that that's kind of generally accepted in American work culture.
I think so. People will say often, they'll say, we'll take care of that after the holidays. I think this particular year we may have a sense of uncertainty even through part of the month of January because we do have a change in government. A change in presidents is happening in January. And I think the holidays will, not the holidays, but the feeling of uncertainty, we can't really schedule clearly for a while. I think this year it might extend into January and after the presidential inauguration. What do you think?
I have to agree with that. That's very true. The holidays are going to give a chance for people to forget a little bit
about work and
responsibilities. Also politics, because it's been a very stressful, very active, very emotional political season that in some way, some people might be able to forget about it. I bet you in many other ways, they're going to be reminded of it every day when they visit their family. And some family members may have different political opinions. Nevertheless, I agree with you that the uncertainty that usually starts around the holiday season about what next year will be like will probably extend a few more weeks into January because of the change in president.
Yes, I think so. Something we haven't mentioned, and we probably should because there are a lot of cultural jokes about it. There are movies, etc. The holidays are also often very stressful in another way because we are, for example, we might have several guests in our house, members of the family who come to stay with us. People try to have pleasant relations, but often families disagree. So it's a time when people are happy and look forward to seeing their family members who live in other parts of the country. But that's not always a happy time, and we do have a lot of jokes about that in this country. Mother-in-law jokes, for example.
That's very true.
Yes.
Well, I do believe that one thing that can bring families together, believe it or not, is holiday movies.
I agree.
Right?
Yes.
So in future episodes, I'd like for us to talk about how Americans in general like to celebrate the holiday season, and equally as important is how different cultures and different religions participate in the holiday season as well. I think we'll have some good conversations that the audience will enjoy.
I hope so.
Thank you for listening to this episode of LPLE. Let's practice listening in English from Dialogue FM. Subscribe to LPLE on iTunes to hear the latest episodes, or listen to past episodes on our website, dialogue.fm. That's dialog.fm. If you have questions or comments about English, or if you would like for us to use a word, grammar, or idiom in our conversation so you can learn how to use it correctly, we would love to hear from you on Twitter at dialogue.fm or Facebook at facebook.com/dialoguefm.